Well, a fun show indeed, Elle, chatting to our old mate, Rob Miles, and quite a varied show in terms of content.
Yeah, great to get an insight into some of his sort of escapades as well as his quite serious injuries, including 2 broken backs.
Yeah, and I actually really enjoyed sharing and recalling some of the stories and then therefore sharing them with the listeners. Stories that most people wouldn't have heard about Rob, because he's certainly an interesting character.
And also get a Welsh perspective on a very un-Welsh wave in the form of Teahupoo in Tahiti.
Absolutely. So yeah, plenty to listen to on this one, and nothing more to say than enjoy the show. Episode 12 of Crest.
We're joined in another iteration of our garden studio by a certified hellman.
Whether it's snow, dirt or water, today's guest has garnered himself a well-deserved reputation as one of Wales' hardest charging countrymen, and has the scars to prove it. We find out what drives the Caerphilly-based pharmacist to throw himself over the ledge time and time again.
Thanks for joining us once again for another edition of Crest, live from the garden studio. You've no doubt heard the raging debate around the jockification of surfing, as Rob has termed it. That has permeated the last few episodes, but today's guest falls firmly clear of any such label. It's Mr. Modest himself, Rob Miles. How are you, Rob?
I'm good, thanks, Al. Good.
Doing well? Had a good day?
Well, we had a better one earlier. It could have gone better earlier at Sandspit, couldn't it?
What do they say, fair to middling?
Average to poor.
Yeah.
Well, we'll be giving you your customary guest intro in just a moment. But first, as is tradition, it's time to formally introduce my colleague for today. To my left is a man who has dedicated his life to destroying all evidence of what he calls his secret sedentary shame. Yes, indeed, for 2 years in his late teens, he barely left the 4 walls of his bedroom, instead choosing to gorge on junk food and watch Frasier on repeat. Since leaving the Fausty gloom, he has sought to carve a space for himself in the world of fitness and professional exercising. And he's done all right. It's Elliot Dudley. How are you, El?
Yeah, doing very well. Officially coming out of lockdown today, we can travel 5.1 miles from the house.
You can legally travel anywhere you like.
Ideal. I'm free to roam. How are you, Rob?
All good, thanks. Yep. Been a busy day. We're back in school, of course, but pleased to hear that we can again legally travel, like you say, more than that 5 miles. And now, Rob, one to make you blush. Firstly, welcome to Crest, and as we briefly touched upon in the opening of the show, today's guest is somewhat of a charger, though he'd never tell you himself. On a bike, skis, or most importantly, for the purposes of Crest at least, on a surfboard, Rob Miles is someone who will always go. From the cliffs of Moher to Teahupoo, Rob has gone out of his way to push himself over the ledge at some of the world's scariest waves, and hasn't always come out unscathed.
With a list of injuries enough to make most people settle into a life of early nights and hot cocoa, it's telling that Rob Miles has done quite the opposite, embarking on a career in pharmacy and configuring it perfectly to complement and fund his pursuit of death barrels. He's showing no signs of slowing down, but how exactly does a boy from Caerphilly end up throwing himself into sub-sea level Teahupoo on one of the best swells on record? Where did it all start, Rob?
You're blushing.
Oh, I am.
We like to give you a good intro. Throws them all off guard.
Where did it all start? To be honest, I've got to give it down to my dad. My dad was a surfer back in the 60s, but he never really got past sort of maybe going out in 2-foot clean Cornwall on his longboard and stuff like that. But anyway, I sort of showed a bit of an interest in, well, bodyboarding, I would say. And pretty much what they would do every Sunday, no matter what, 2 o'clock, they'd rock up at Rest Bay, and I was sent in the sea. whether it was 40 mile an hour onshore or 6 inches and clean. I had to go in there, and sometimes I'd have to come back in at the Esplanade and walk all the way back because the current had taken me all the way down there.
I suppose we've all kind of like experienced that. It's the if you make the drive to the beach, you're going in regardless, aren't you?
Yeah, and I think for all three of us, I think now, because we all live a good sort of half hour at least away from the beach. Once you drive down, you're going in, no matter what. Unless it's flat. That's the only reason why I wouldn't go in the sea.
Yeah, it's not often you turn away, is it? So, it started off as bodyboarding, like you say. When did the surfing begin?
I can't remember where I got it. I think maybe my parents bought me a Bic. It was like a 7.3 Bic, and I think because with the bodyboarding, because I did it for so many years, you just got used to like when to paddle out, how to duck dive. You knew 90% of surfing, I find, is literally just knowing how to catch.
Well, that's it. You see
wave to catch.
You see learners, don't you? And they're kind of doomed from the start by their like inability to paddle and their lack of where to sit, lack of knowledge of where to sit, and so on.
I find the surfing is the easy part almost. It's being in the right place at the right time and making sure you're there as much as you can. But
so quick transition for you, presumably, from bodyboard to surfboard.
Yeah, so as soon as I got the minimal, it was probably only a couple of months until I bought my first shortboard, where someone sold me like a 5.6 toothpick, which was
standard practice back in the 90s.
Go on, sell it. It's fine.
Yeah.
So how old were you at that? How old were you when you started surfing?
To be honest, I think I was probably about 16, 17.
So in the grand scheme of things, a fairly late starter.
Yeah.
And you've gone from late starter into Teahupoo. Well,
eventually.
We'll come to that in a bit, though. We will come to that in a bit. Before that, I did want to mention that you've become known as someone that's travelled quite extensively, and like I say, earning yourself a reputation for that. And I'd assume that probably prompted you to pursue that career in pharmacy. Perhaps a career path that's never really struck me as a surfer's career path, but seemingly more and more like the ultimate job, because I don't think I know anybody that surfs more than you, apart from Elliot.
I don't know if that's a compliment or an indication of
it's a compliment from me.
Me being feckless.
No, it's a compliment from me, for sure.
I never did it for that reason. To be honest, I did pharmacy because the school told me to do pharmacy. I just wanted something where I went to university and there was 100% employment rate.
Yeah.
So a lot of jobs, you go to university and maybe only 30% of them get a job. So in other words, you're fighting for that job. But I knew I was never going to be that good of a student. so I never wanted to fight for a job. So I sort of came out of uni and pretty much they offered me the last job which was going, which happened to be in the Gower, basically because
I remember
no one
you
lived
getting
there.
that gig.
Yeah, no one lived there. So they thought, I was like, yes.
There's quids in for you.
Yeah, and obviously good old the pharmacy there was just, I don't think they've ever had a pre-reg before because no one's ever accepted that job.
Yeah.
So it worked. So
and
that's where it started.
Is it as good as it seems as a surf job?
I mean, it gives you the longer shift patterns. So to me, I find you're better off if you're in work for the day. You're better off being in work for 12 hours plus, because if you're in work 9 to 5, by the time you leave and come back to the house, that's basically 8 till 6. Your day's gone, so you may as well just sacrifice the whole day and just go at 7 and come back at 10.
Yeah.
Because
aside from the kind of the midsummer kind of super long days, you're always rushing to fit a surf in, which actually I always find when you rush for a surf, it's never as enjoyable anyway, is it?
That's it. And it's kind of it's impossible midwinter.
Exactly. When the surf's mostly good from sort of September till March, you can't really squeeze the surf in after 6 o'clock either. So, if you can manage to do 3 12-hour shifts in a week, that gives you 4 days completely clear then.
Yeah.
And I think that's worked well for me surfing wise. But like I say, now I'm moving more towards doing other things as well. Actually, it is quite nice if you finish at 6 and you can get like a 2-hour bike ride in as well at the same time.
So I remember we were talking about this the other day, and I was kind of trying to think back about when we first met. And the first time I ever saw you surfing was, I wasn't really doing an awful lot. I was surfing pretty much every day, regardless of how good the waves were.
I remember surfing with you at Porthcawl Point.
So basically, there was we used to surf Porthcawl Point a lot, and go out on days really where it was kind of like no one else really wanted it. It was like 4 foot howling on shore, and you were the only other guy that was ever out, so kind of you could see you were craving after something a bit more kind of a little bit less tame than the kind of the everyday, I guess, even back then.
Back into the pharmacy, apart from being able to surf before or after work, again, I mentioned that you're kind of renowned for your travel, and certainly strike missions. It seems to me you always seem to score wherever you go. But does pharmacy allow that, or how does it allow it?
I would say it's
Personally,
not,
for you, what's your shift? What does your week look like?
at the moment I am working Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. That is my shift pattern at the moment. So I've got a lovely long weekend.
Of course,
but things do change. But I mean, when it comes to the holidays, I don't get any more holidays than anyone else really. But what I would do is maybe I don't do any sort of prolonged travel. You know, a lot of people will go and live in Oz for a year. A lot of people will go and live in New Zealand for a year. Like similar to what Elliot's just done, they've gone around the world in one big thing. So it almost counts as sort of one trip to people's eyes.
Yeah.
But whereas I've never really done that apart from once, I've just gone for like 1 week mission. So it does look like maybe I go away more than it comes across.
Maybe
as.
because you score all the time. So you obviously don't book in advance. You do it on a swell.
Is that a calculated thing? Is it just that you've been pretty lucky?
So what we do is we book. So with my job, I can't just take it off sort of willy-nilly last second. So you sort of book a week off. Say I've looked at the rota and I've got a week off on the 20th of January. So what we do, we don't book anything for that. Try and get as many of your friends on the same sort of week off as you can as well, whoever's up for it. And then when it comes to a couple of days before that, you can see which parts of Europe or the world look good, really.
Yeah.
So, like last time it was Morocco. My plan was never to go Morocco again because I'm never its biggest fan, to be honest.
Yeah.
I find it's quite busy. It is sunny. It's a good sunny place to go. But
where did you go on that trip?
We went to Safi, but that chart just lighted up sort of about a week before. But it's not that I took it off work last second. It just happened to have that week off, and so that worked really well.
It's luck more than planning.
That's a bit of luck, yeah.
And
so,
the year before that, am I right in saying you went to Sardinia of all places and scored good waves?
Did, yeah. And there's one place, if anyone's looking at somewhere to go in Europe, like for a week's holiday, you would be in heaven in Sardinia.
Really?
There's point breaks, slabs, beach breaks. There's no tide, so you don't even have to get up early, for instance, because there is no tide. It's the same tide all day. The water's see-through. But you do
any localism there?
There was a bit of localism at the one spot, but in this one spot there's sort of 3 different waves, and they're all really good. But there's one which says locals only, but it's the worst one.
Right, yeah.
so you just let them crack on with that and make them think like they're being big and tough.
A bit like the kind of the Coney Beach of Sardinia, I presume.
Yeah, it is a bit. Yeah,
it's one of those places that's kind of always been on my radar. I think there's quite a famous picture of it in the old Storm Rider Guide to Europe, with a guy on on a red gun or something on quite a big wave that you wouldn't necessarily anticipate being in Sardinia. But does it get big?
It does get. We couldn't believe. So the first day we rocked up, the day before the swell, it was flat, and we thought, is this the right thing we've done? So we went snorkeling because the water is gorgeous, and there's loads of wildlife in the sea as well. And then the next day it was like 5 foot 7 seconds on Magic Seaweed, which this could go either way.
Yeah.
But it was, I would say, 4 foot and clean as well. And it did peak at about sort of 12 foot 10 seconds, and it was sort of 8 or 10 feet on the outer points.
Wow.
And clean. We couldn't believe it. And then even down to the size, there was one day I was saying to you, Rob, it was 3 foot 6 seconds. And we thought, we'll just drive to this beach break. It was really open, and it was sort of really short period waves, but it was sort of only breaking about 20 yards from the sand. But because it was so A-framey, it was just coming in, and it was just sort of 1 second head dips either way.
Yeah.
We spent hours in there.
Was it? What time of year did you go there?
We went in January, and it wasn't warm. So if you ever go there,
I think that's a misconception, isn't it? The Med does get pretty chilly, especially that kind of part of the Med.
The wind comes straight off the Alps, pretty much, which generates all the swell. So when it hit Sardinia, on top of the mountains, it was actually snowing. Wow. And those mountains aren't that high. They were only sort of about, maybe a bit bigger than Pen y Fan.
Right.
But it was snowing, so I wish I had gloves and a hood.
I
definitely would have put it on.
Your reputation as kind of as a man of strike missions, although not planned, I think is probably fairly well earned.
I think, yeah.
I mean, you're known as a bit of a, I wouldn't say lunatic, but you're kind of there's definitely a lack of fear. That's what you're known for. When did you really notice? I mean, I know we did some trips. Probably first trip I ever did to the northeast of England.
I was going to bring that up.
It was with you, and
if anything, was a strike mission.
All three of us on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a wild trip.
It's like a foot of snow.
Yeah, I mean, it was very reckless. It was the kind of thing you would only do as a student when you didn't have a brain, probably, or...
If you saw the forecast now, I wouldn't go... Oh, well, I think it would probably have
was
some
incredible, though, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it
was.
Really, really big
It was
staves.
classic, yeah. But, I mean, was that kind of... Had you already kind of started chasing out kind of those... Or searching out those really hollow spots at that point, or...?
No, I think it's probably from the northeast all this sort of started from, because that is always a strike mission. Like, you know, it's you can sort of see it about 5 or 6 days out, but you don't really know you're going to go until about a day or two before.
And I mean, like, was it the waves? Like, what got you really into the kind of hollow waves that you're known as a kind of your backside chew riding's pretty solid. Was it practice up there that really did it, or
basically because I'm rubbish at doing turns and I can't do a turn to save my life, so the only thing left is to try and get a head dip, which you can't do in Wales very often. And
you seem to do it right with that.
I seem to wedge my head into a couple of them.
There's a few Gower super banks that you've been frequenting, supposedly.
There is one left, I think, in Wales that I'm not going to say where it is at all, but there is a super bank in Wales somewhere that no one seems to know about.
Well, we won't. We'll ask you that off air. But in addition to the kind of surfing lunacy, you were all. I mean, one of my first memories of you was in Cardiff, and I think we were in the Cardiff University Surf Club, and I was scared of you, just because you just seemed wild. Yeah, you were quite wild, but your lunacy seems to transcend surfing and goes. You're a really keen mountain biker, a very competent skier, but again, any photo or video I see of you seems to be doing something ridiculous, like
or falling off,
jumping off a chalet roof on a pair of skis, like a pair of skis, or doing big airs on bikes.
A lot of it is mainly me falling off. Like, you guys can testify that I am not. I would say I am probably your average Welsh surfer who just pushes his luck.
Yeah. Okay, let me ask another question then. So, are you aware that people think you've got a bit of a screw loose when it comes to these kind of like daring feats, or do you just consider it normal?
I just think to me I think it's normal. I mean I know, like, the Teahupoo thing, everyone, but to be honest, I think the reason why everyone thinks Teahupoo is a horrible wave is because the only videos we see of it is when it's like 12, 15 foot and people are towing into it. Under that, I would say under 10 foot even, it's actually not that bad, and it just washes you over a nice smooth quiet reef. You can walk over it slowly.
I've heard stories of guys going out there on a 3 foot day and having all their clothes ripped off them. So again, I guess it's varying degrees of normality, perhaps. I mean, you went to Teahupoo off the back of. Had you been to Pipe at the time, or?
No, I hadn't been to Pipe then. But to be honest, I would say Pipeline is a lot heavier than Teahupoo, just because of the randomness of Pipeline.
Yeah, it's not perfect, is it?
It's not perfect. There's a lot of people in the sea. There's a lot of people in the way as well. So when you're paddling for a wave, you can't just paddle into a wave. You've almost got like 4 people you've got to sort of jockey through the middle of to get the wave.
I remember I found the worst thing at Pipe was not the wave itself. It was the fact that you couldn't commit to a wave 100% until the last minute.
Yeah.
There was always someone inside you, there was always someone outside of you, and you never really knew if it was your wave or if it was someone else's.
Exactly.
It's not like surfing your local break where you can just commit and go.
And 100%. Eventually, you'll be paddling for a wave, so it's a closeout, and then loads of people will shout for you to go, and then you think,
I don't want to go.
But then in your head you just thought, I have to go, otherwise they're never going to give me a wave.
We're talking about all these kind of dreamy spots around the world, but going back to the mountain biking, which again, whenever I look at Instagram, it just seems to be a picture of, or a video of you flying over these jumps, mountain biking. We are quite fortunate, as you pointed out when we had a little chat earlier, to live in an area with incredible mountain biking kind of facilities. I say facilities, we've got just brilliant runs, right?
I would, to put it into surfing terms, as far as mountain biking is concerned, if you live in South Wales, especially in like the sort of South Wales valleys, it is equivalent of living in Bali at the moment. Mm-hmm. You've got that many amazing world-class spots on your doorstep, which you don't even have to drive your car to. or at worst, within if you put a 10-mile radius, or like the lockdown rules, a 5-mile radius around, say, Caerphilly, where I'm from, there are so many spots you can go biking, and people would drive across the whole country to go there.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are sort of what you'd call like sort of still semi-little secret spots as well. And you've got
like a macaronis, but on mountain bikes.
Yeah, on mountain bikes, yeah.
Are you involved in the kind of the underground sort of trail cruise, building
No,
trails and stuff?
I will admit I am very lazy. I just I just learn that they're built and I go and ride them.
Yeah. It's funny because it's been like, I remember years ago it was like in I think it made it in one of the American mountain bike, the mountain bike equivalent of Surfer Mag.
Yeah.
They actually had like Kunkan forest in there as like one of the top like 10 places to mountain bike in the world. I mean, perhaps they hadn't visited other places in Wales, because I'd say there's probably even better trails than that these days. But that was a real eye opener for me, thinking, imagine if the surf was as good as the mountain biking.
So the message is to surfers of Wales, start mountain biking.
But a couple of the bikers have started surfing occasion on their longboards, and they did bring up the thing of localism.
Yeah.
And they had such a good point. And they say just out of say, I'll say Llanto, say they've got a couple of locals at Llanto who think they should have priority over others.
Yes.
Well, when it comes to mountain biking, those guys who've dug the trails have spent hours, days, weeks, years maintaining all these trails, so they are sort of genuine locals, where the people who've just happened to be lucky to have been born in that nearest town, I said, how the hell does that make them get priority over anyone else?
Yeah.
Is there a level of priority then for those guys that dig the trails? Or
Not really.
It just doesn't really, I guess.
It doesn't really happen, to be honest.
No.
If anything, they're really helpful and nice. And then it's not until they came into the surfing, and then they've had someone shout at them for being at Llanto, say.
Yeah.
And they want to turn around and say, hang on, did you build this point break?
Yeah.
Or did you just be happy that your parents born you into that house over there?
Yeah, that's interesting.
I mean, that's the endless debate with localism, really, isn't it? I think the more inconsistent the waves are, or the more kind of infrequently a spot breaks, that tends to be where localism kind of flourishes a bit more. If you've got like a very, very consistent beach break that breaks most days, you're not going to get it as much.
But luckily in Wales, to be honest, I don't think we really have any problems. I've never really seen any problems.
You're immune to it.
I'm not immune to it.
I think Welsh people are maybe just a bit too friendly, probably.
Yeah.
We are inherently friendly as a nation, I think.
I think you could find it if you sort of just kept paddling back and forth to the peak every wave. I think you would get it, but
I do it all the time, mate.
Yeah, Elliot's really
all the time. Joking.
Yeah, I've done notice Elliot does get most of the waves. And he dropped in on me the other day.
Oh dear.
On camera as well.
There's video evidence, yeah. I'll post it. I'll send it through, and we can put it out with the podcast.
So, aside from
and I believe I live closer to the Ogmore than you.
Not at the moment. Yeah, I'm currently homeless. So
Okay.
We'll leave it at that.
aside from the mountain biking, the skiing, the surfing, I've also seen your lunacy, as we'll term it, again in inverted commas, kind of rear its head in other forms. And this was at the an event that we talked about quite a lot on Crest, and that's the Bucks Student Nationals.
Oh gosh.
And this is one of my first memories of you. We're in some nightclub near the harbour, and you reminded me of it earlier, but you were dressed as a woman at the time, and
Nothing new.
I just remember seeing you getting kicked out of this nightclub naked. Well, you weren't quite naked because you had a pair of socks on, by these bouncers that had wrestled you off stage, and they said, wait there, we're going to go inside and get you a bag to walk home in, presumably a bin bag or something like that. And you said, no need, boys, in your kind of Welsh drawl, and out of your socks produced a pair of boxer shorts that you had prepared. Do you always take boxers in your socks?
It wasn't well.
You'd like to say it wasn't the first time.
No, it wasn't the first time. Unfortunately, whenever you go out wearing a dress, I just assume that it's probably going to get ripped off by someone.
And the not wearing of underwear, is that a worry about visible panty line, or does it spoil the line of the dress, or is it?
I can't remember if I actually wore pants under the dress, or did I just throw them into the crowd. I can't remember.
They went at some point anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, well, the less we dwell on that, the better. I'd like now to, if we can, talk about something that a lot of people kind of again know you for this. Kind of word spreads around, doesn't it, quickly in Welsh surfing circles, and it was the horrific injury you sustained when you fell off a cliff, basically.
Yeah.
And well, I mean, talk us through it. What happened? Don't tell us about what happened, but what was the kind of fallout from it? Excuse the pun.
I mean, looking back at it, it was just an accident waiting to happen, really. Well, you know, I think it's something that we did through uni a couple of times, and then for some reason I thought, I know what a great idea would be. Let's have my 30th birthday party there.
Yeah.
In the middle of nowhere, we'll have a big campfire. But obviously and it was next to the cliff edge, which it sounds unbelievable now, but no one even thought of it at the time.
Yeah.
The
long story short, you fell off a cliff, but what was what happened as a result of it? What kind of injuries did you sustain?
Well,
it's quite a long list.
I'll have to start. Do I start from the head down or
Let's go head down.
Head down. So, first of all, I had a load of stitches in the back of my head and a fractured skull. Going down from that, then I broke my back in 2 places. On my right side, I'd broken my shoulder. On my left side, I'd broken my arm in multiple places. I had 9 broken ribs and 2 punctured lungs. I broke my hip. I'd compounded my femur and broke my ankle, and there was loads of other little bits of stitches around there as well, which I can't even remember where they were.
And presumably airlifted.
Airlifted, yeah. But just remember, when you're at Pete's Reef, there's no phone signal, so some boys had to run up in the dark to the top of the cliff to try and get a phone signal, and you say, "Where am I?" And they'll be like, "He's at Pete's Reef." Well,
yeah. Where's that?
Yeah, they'll be like, "Where's that then?" And then how would you describe a reef in the Gower reef stretch?
Yeah.
You know, that stretch is probably 5 miles long, and they needed a pinpoint, so I'm not sure how they got there.
Yeah, but they did.
They didn't have that 3-word localization
they got that now, haven't they?
sort of thing back then, did they?
No.
It would have been helpful, actually.
So, and then they sent the wrong helicopter because the first helicopter couldn't land.
Wow.
So they had to get a winch in helicopter, so that had to come. And then none of the police, obviously, or the ambulance could find where we were from the car park, which was a good, you know, even in the daylight, you know, it's a good 20 minutes walk.
Yeah.
So in the pitch black, they had no chance of finding where we were. So of all places to fall off a cliff, it was probably the worst place to choose and the worst time of day to do it at midnight.
And, I mean, I can't even imagine sustaining those kind of injuries, but very painful.
Not at the time. At the time, no. But
a bit out of it, I imagine.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't really. My friend Dan, the last thing I remember was getting carried onto the winch for the helicopter, and he dropped me, and that's the last thing I remember.
Yeah.
So I think he was at the back. I think he was tripped over because he couldn't see where he was walking, and that was it. So,
was there were you scared when it happened? Did you have?
I think I was just in shock, to be honest. I remember my leg was just sort of bananaed out.
Yeah.
Sort of looked pretty deformed.
I presume you bounced a few times on your way down, hence all the injuries, or was it?
It was just straight on the bottom, but it wasn't really a flat landing. I think that's just what caused it all.
Right.
So, looking at it now, if you look off the edge, the luck involved in surviving that.
You've obviously been surfed down there since.
Yeah, I surfed down there since.
Give you shudders going there?
No, I thought it would, but I could dangle my legs off it. So on the edge, I thought it would, but it never did.
So the recovery from that then presumably was long-winded.
It wasn't.
Doctors, they must have just been pulling their hair out at the thought of it.
To be fair, the doctors are experts at putting you back together. What I would say, you couldn't get a better treatment than what I had in a hospital. But once you leave hospital, the recovery is a lot down to you.
Yeah.
So the physios are there to help you and point you in the right direction, but having sort of 2 half-hour physio sessions a week is not going to make you better. So because I was off work, so I just used it as a 9-to-5 job almost. So I was sort of going to the local swimming pool, doing laps across the swimming pool, walking frontwards and walking backwards, walking sideways until I felt comfortable. And I would sort of start in sort of neck deep water, because it takes more weight off your legs, really, the deeper water you're in, and then you just move your way shallower and shallower. So you put more and more pressure on your legs then, and that's how I sort of learned to walk and move again, doing that then.
I think it's one of those things with the NHS is amazing, but they never have the time or resources to give you kind of. It's aimed at your average person, whereas most normal surfers are what in terms of their activity level are above average, and they're and they're probably not going to want to go back to the level of activity that's expected. They want to go above and beyond.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's the question I was going to ask next. So, was there at any point, was it in doubt that you might be able to surf or do all these things that you enjoyed doing again?
I mean, in hospital they did tell me that I'd have to accept that things are never going to be the same.
I bet that didn't sit very well with you.
not the best, but at the time I was sort of just. To be honest, I think I was sort of semi in shock for a couple of weeks really about what's just happened and how much has just gone wrong, and you don't really feel like it was lucky that I survived, or it was lucky that it was me who went off that cliff and no one else, because inevitably it was my fault that happened in the first place. It was me who organised that party. It was me who decided to have it there. It was. It was me who should have thought, put the thought in, and a bit of risk assessment really before I decided to do that. So, I didn't really think of the positives of it until a couple of weeks later when I found myself sort of walking again and moving again. But more than anything, it was luckily they put all metal down in my leg, because the femur was completely shattered and the hip was broken quite well. It was so that's made of metal now. So technically that was fixed straight away.
So you said a couple of weeks afterwards you were walking again. I would have thought such injuries would have been like months.
No, well, I literally did in Caerphilly swimming pool. I was going in the OAP hour as well, so I didn't get in people's way. I was spending hours and hours in the pool until I was sort of like a crinkly mess.
Yeah.
And then they'd have to help me get out of the pool sometimes because I still couldn't get out of it.
So give us a time frame then for recovery from those injuries. What was the first kind of major feat you achieved post-injury?
So I did walk up Pen y Fan, mainly because apparently I said it when I was in hospital. So I thought I'd keep with that, or at least give it a good
you said
go.
when they said you won't be able to do these things, you said I will walk up Pen y Fan within this period of time. What time frame did you give?
It took me. I said a month.
A month.
So it took me 5.5 hours to do it.
You did it within a month.
Yeah, I did it on the day of a month to the day I did it on, and it did take me 5.5 hours,
which is torture.
Yeah, which was
within a
mental,
month after sustaining all those injuries is incredible.
But the way I thought of it, I was like, I either do it or I just sit on the couch.
Yeah,
I had nothing to lose. Basically, it was middle of the summer as well, so.
Do you have any obviously any time you break a bone, you are more at risk of arthritis, that kind of stuff, and I've broken a couple of bones, and you do get the odd niggle. Do you still get stuff like that, or not really?
Only in my wrist, because my wrist, there's one bone in my arm there, and the end is snapped off just before that lump.
Yeah.
But it does give me, it is sort of semi bit of pain. I'm sure it'll get worse as I get older.
Yeah.
But they sort of did suggest that maybe every 10 years I'd have to go in and they'd have to, whatever they do to the bone to stop the arthritis getting quite so bad.
Okay, so apart from physical injuries, was there ever a thought that, you said you could dangle your feet off the cliff when you went down there for a surf, but does it ever make you take a step back and go, oh, this could end in disaster?
No, not at all. And I genuinely thought all the way through, I said, I'm dreading looking off the edge of something ever again. And then as soon as I got to the edge of something, just nothing. Absolutely nothing. Maybe it'll come back and haunt me, I don't know. But not at the moment.
It wasn't the first time you broke your back, was it?
No, it was the second back break.
So what was the sort of situation? Were you travelling, or were you about to go travelling with that one?
The first one I was snowboarding, and thanks to a dodgy grind rail. I wouldn't say dodgy grind rail, dodgy snowboarder trying a grind rail. I just messed it up. Annoyingly, I'd done the grind rail quite a few times, and for some reason it just went over and snap. So there's a couple of breaks on that one as well, and that was just before I went for my first round the world trip to Tahiti. But I did have about 3.5 months to recover from that one, and it wasn't a particularly bad break It was sore, but it wasn't.
So when you got to Tahiti, you kind of had a bit of a dry spell, really.
Well, I just come back from J-Bay, and I spent 2 weeks in Peru as well.
Right.
It was
Oh, this is the round the world trip.
Yeah.
Oh, talk us through the itinerary.
which wasn't much. Well, it's
Where
a
did
bit
it
of a
start?
dodgy itinerary because it was to J-Bay and back.
The backwards one. Okay.
Yeah, and then it was to Peru, and then from Peru to LA to Tahiti, and then Tahiti to New Zealand, and then Australia. Then
They must be paying you pharmacists too much. That's the most expensive round the world trip I think going, isn't it?
it wasn't cheap, but I did plan ahead for a good sort of.
Was it one of those like all like bundles where you pay like a
No.
$2,000 and you get like 7 flights or something?
No, I just freestyled it, and at one point I got to Peru to fly to LA, and they'd cancelled my flight.
Oh, no.
They sent me the email, but obviously I didn't check the emails. So I just went to check into my flight. I'm sorry, sir, that's doesn't exist. But the one thing I would say to everyone, anyone's listening, I would just say that if you are booking trips like that, always book a return, because for some reason, even though you just want to fly to Peru, it's a lot cheaper to buy a return trip from London to Peru back to London than it is just to buy one from London to Peru, which makes no sense.
No.
The other thing I've noticed on the trip I was on recently is that unless you've got definitive proof that you're leaving a country, they're really, really reluctant to let you in these days.
Yeah.
Even to the point where, like we had like flights booked, but they were open flights, on a round the world ticket. And they wanted like a precise day, otherwise they wouldn't let us in the country. So, I mean, it is tricky for sure.
Not just entertainment. Just good advice on Crest cast. Amazing. So as you were saying, the itinerary, you went to South Africa, Peru, LA,
then to Tahiti.
This is the bit I think that we want to drill down on, because you surfed Teahupoo on what has been described as one of the best swells the locals have ever seen there. For its consistency, wasn't it? As much as
yeah, I mean, I don't know whether it was good for me. It was good to watch.
Well, it was that swell that Nathan Florence got that incredible, much publicised barrel on.
That, believe it or not, that was the third swell out of 3 big swells which happened in that 2-week period. But the reality was, I was there for 2 weeks, and there was probably 5 or 6 days which you couldn't surf because it was just so big. And there's nowhere in Tahiti which is like a sheltered spot. So you get a massive swell coming in to say Rest Bay. You've got Coney, you can go and surf. In Tahiti, it doesn't happen. There's no way there's no way you can surf which is sort of sheltered from it also. And the only place which holds a big swell is Teahupoo, which obviously you can't surf. But it is great to paddle out to and have a watch though.
So you paddled out on the big days?
I paddled out on the big days, and you can sit in the channel and watch it.
Is it? This is the kind of everybody's familiar with how the wave looks, and often when it's really, really big, so that's when the video footage gets published. But I mean, very few people, certainly surfers in Wales, have actually gone there and surfed it. So I kind of wanted to get a flavour of what it looks like. How far is that paddle? Does it take a long time?
It takes about 20 minutes from the beach all the way around to Teahupoo.
Right. Okay.
And when you look at it, when the first time I got there, because I avoided it on the first day, it was sort of like 10 foot and clean.
Yeah.
And I just thought, oh, it's going to be rammed. I don't want to be sat in the way of anyone. So I avoided it on the first day and surfed one of the other passes. The next day it was probably about 6 foot, and about midday the wind goes sort of cross shore. Yeah. And so anyone who goes in the morning. So I paddled out at midday, and I was actually on my own. There was no one in. Wow. And this happened quite a few times as well. There was midday, there was just no one in.
Still pretty good?
Still really good.
Did it handle the cross shore? Or?
Yeah, it was fine, because it was just like a take-off into a sort of barrel, and you jump out the end. It wasn't too bad, but when you look at it, I couldn't even see, when you look at it from the beach, you can't really see Teahupoo. It's really difficult, so it's almost, if you think of just like a reef pass, which is I think it's probably about half a mile long, and then Teahupoo is sort of just in the middle of it, and it's a wave from the car, it just looks like it breaks, and then there's like a half a second gap before it closes out on the reef again. And that is Teahupoo. And from the car, you just think, is that a wave?
Yeah.
Like, is that actually for real? And so you paddle out there, and there was nowhere really there was no one there, so I didn't know where to sit. It did take me about 45 minutes to catch my first wave, and it was only a 4-footer.
Yeah.
I didn't get barreled. I was so much on the shoulders, jumped off the end, but it was a good place to start.
Who were you with on that trip?
No one. I went that part of the trip I was on my own for then.
So out there completely solo, no one around.
Completely solo. Yeah.
That's again, even though there's only 4 foot, it's still like surfing Teahupoo by yourself. It's pretty sketchy.
It sounds sketchy, and it did feel sketchy. But what I would say was there's at that size, I would say, I don't know if we're allowed to name spots in the northeast here.
Well, you'd say town, certainly.
Say the point at Staithes.
Yeah.
At that size, that is a lot heavier than Teahupoo is.
Really?
A lot heavier. And I say you don't really see that really thick lipped Teahupoo until it gets to sort of what I would call 10 foot plus, really.
That's
and then
really interesting.
underneath that, I mean, the thing which does put us off, because we're Welsh, when we're used to seeing no rocks,
Yeah.
is looking straight down at the reef.
I've often said this, you know, a lot of our local reef breaks, I think, you know, the amount of times I've grounded myself even just paddling out duck diving, so you know they are shallow, but you're almost blissfully ignorant with the brown water. It can be a bit of a blessing sometimes,
and you know, especially, you know, there are quite a few, you know, even say Porthcawl Point, for instance, there's, you know, you can take off pretty shallow there.
Yeah. Well,
imagine if that water was see-through and you just saw them all looking at you.
I think Rhino's always said that about the point and the S. If it were clear, you wouldn't surf it.
No, you wouldn't. You just
Well,
say
a lot
that
of
it's
people
just,
wouldn't surf
that's
it,
just
yeah.
on dry reef.
You'd
I'm not
surf
going
it.
there. No, I'd try and fall off on it. But no, it does take. It takes that.
You mentioned the fact that you sort of look at it from the car. You obviously can you stay actually in the village itself, or were you like staying a little bit further away from that?
I stayed in a hostel, which was, to be honest, it was a bit annoying. It was about 40 minutes drive away, which is fine because you could just drive willy-nilly through through Tahiti, which is pretty beautiful, and you pass loads of nice little beaches and stuff like that. But when I get there, I'd already paid for the hostel for 2 weeks, which is more than enough money. But when you're passing, you see loads of little homestays, where I think little families own, and they'll have a sign up saying, oh, you know, $50 a night if you want to stay. Yeah. Which was annoying. So if you were ever to go there again, there's probably more online now. Yeah. But at the time, because it was quite a few years ago now, I don't think they'd really got on top of all the online sort of
remember there was a longboard event once. It was like a European tour event that ironically they held, obviously because Tahiti's part of France officially. Yeah. They had a European tour event in Tahiti, and I think maybe one French guy went there because it was just so expensive. You know, there was like limited flights, and then when you got there, you know, there was like nowhere to stay. It always seemed to me like it was one of those really expensive trips. Could you do it on a budget or not really?
No, I've looked at going there again because I would love to go there again before we get too old. But the flights is just extortion. You know, you're looking at about £1,500 for a flight there, just because there's so many changes you have to do, and inevitably there's not many airlines who fly straight into Tahiti. Yeah. So no matter which way you go, obviously you can get to LA cheap enough. Yeah. But to get from LA to Tahiti, or from New Zealand to Tahiti, there's only one.
I was on a flight from LA to the Cook Islands on a round the world trip. The Cook Islands was a stopover, like a 3 stops. We had it. Yeah. And there's a hurricane or cyclone, as they call it over there, was hitting Rarotonga where we were due to land. And we were about an hour out, and the captain said, "Oh, ladies and gentlemen, we're diverting to Tahiti," and we were just like nice. We're going to Tahiti, and they're going to have to put us up in a hotel. Yeah, it's going to be great. And we made our approach, and we started like losing altitude as we came into Tahiti, and you could see the runway. It was that close, and they pulled up. Said, "Oh, the weather's cleared," and they pulled up and took us back to the Cook Islands for 2 weeks, which is even more expensive than Tahiti, and there was no waves. Didn't surf once. It was so close. I was so close to having it. So the prices are more scary than the waves, presumably.
They are. But I mean, when I've ever since you've been somewhere and you look at, say, a WCT event there, almost every event I watch there, they never get that. It's rare that they get a big swell, really. Yeah. Or if they do get it, it's more than a day. So I would actually love to go there and have like a normal waiting period where it was just between sort of 3 and 8 feet or something.
Do you think it'd be busy then?
I don't think it would. I think it is in the morning, so first light a lot of people will go out, but if you went out sort of 11 in the morning till 2 or 3 in the afternoon, more often than not I was on my own.
Amazing.
I presume there's a lot of other spots there though. I've heard of some really good right-handers as well.
There are, but the only thing with those are they're quite a swim, so unless you've got a boat or you're prepared for a 45-minute swim, like some of them are really far offshore, like a lot further than Teahupoo. So unless you had a boat,
So
you had
there's
no way of
not
getting
like
to it.
just a super nice, easy back beach that you can go surf. You know?
No, there's one beach break there, and it's really rippy. It's really hard to surf.
Right.
It's really hard to surf.
This is really interesting because, of course, the kind of the surf media portrayal of Teahupoo and Tahiti is basically, well, Teahupoo, isn't it? That's the wave that everybody goes to, and you don't see the movement from the coast or from the beach to the lineup. It's purely from the boat and the lineup, and that's it.
Yeah.
So it's nice to get
And
this.
they're getting the
alternative
VIP
take.
treatment as well, aren't
Absolutely.
they?
When
They're
they
not
on the
driving,
ski,
they're
yeah.
not pulling up in a hire car and paddling
No.
for 20 minutes.
With for us, I would say it hasn't got that much variety of surf, really, because unless you're rich enough to pay for a boat, you're really stuck with maybe like 3 or 4 spots,
Yeah.
which pick up that swell. So say if it was 6 foot and clean, there are plenty of really good spots, but apart from Teahupoo, there's not many which you can actually swim to.
Yeah.
So, obviously, we've talked about your escapades globally. On a more local level, you do always seem to score. I very rarely see sort of, maybe it's just the social media world these days, you only see the best bits.
Yeah.
But you do generally seem to score good waves or better waves than most people are getting, and with very little crowd. So what's the secret with that? Is it just that you know where to go, or are you just willing to go a bit further?
I think it's all a case of rolling the dice a little bit with it. So if you know, it's hard to do it without naming spots. So if you've got, say, someone like Llantuit, which is absolutely perfect, like the day of the year for Llantuit, generally that means it's the day of the year for that whole entire South Wales coast sort of thing.
Yeah.
But you are sort of rolling the dice where you do have to sacrifice that day of the year you probably waited all for to go and surf somewhere else.
Does that then depend on how often you surfed running up to it? So if you've had a couple of good surfs, if it's like a 3 or 4 day swell, you've had 2 or 3 days of good waves, I mean, it's a no-brainer, surely, that 4th day of rolling the dice. But the first day of the swell?
I think it's more to do with when you've rolled the dice and you've rolled it wrong. So, eventually when you keep getting, you start to get to know when these spots sort of work a little bit more then, but you do have to you will lose out on a few good days first, but then eventually you will get better days, because even though maybe the waves might not be quite as good, but you will be there on your own or with just a couple of friends. Or
it's that toss-up, isn't it? What would you rather?
Yeah, so for me, I would rather surf a wave which is maybe a 7 out of 10 with not so many people out, rather than surfing a 10 out of 10 wave with everyone out, where you might only catch one wave really, and or you can catch 30 really good waves.
Fair to say, yeah.
And is that getting harder, do you think?
It's definitely getting harder now. I think people, I mean, Google Maps, and there's better forecasts, and you can load up on wind charts, and you can just see when you put the wind on top of the coast which parts of the coast are going to be offshore, and you can sort of work it out. I think a lot of people are working it out a lot more now.
Do you think the surfing kind of psyche has changed a little bit, in that people seem to want to share it a bit more these days? That everyone's desperate for people to know that they've scored.
Exactly, yeah. So there's certain people you can't, under no circumstance would you bring them along with you, because it would just be plastered on Instagram, for instance, and the next thing they know, all their friends will be like, where was that taken, where was that taken? And eventually they're going to crack and they're going to tell them, and next thing you know, instead of you being there on your own, there's going to be 15 people out on the next swell, which did happen once to me, because I told one certain South Wales surf photographer where I'd surf, next swell there was 13 people out on a wave that I'd never seen anyone before.
Yeah, and it's not just in kind of our local area. You're willing to make those drives, aren't you, to other areas of Wales? And you said that people are kind of becoming more aware of using Google Maps and so forth. I mean, my experience view is that you've done that, and I've been on trips with you where you've kind of put that to good use, and we've scored some good waves around the place.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is good novelty waves as well, though, to be honest. So you might get a good photo, but really, is it
as good as it looks?
Is it as good as it looks? Yeah, because I mean, a photo.
Okay, mate, we're seeing behind the magician's cloth here, because quite a lot of the videos that you put on Instagram and Facebook are of you getting barreled, point of view, GoPro in the mouth, GoPro in the hand, wherever it is. Are they as good as they look?
The annoying thing about those GoPro videos is the best ones I can't post because it shows exactly where they are.
Oh no.
So a lot of them, if you do come out of the barrel, you can just
Yeah.
everyone's like, oh, that's there.
That's why you
So
always
you-
post closeouts.
So if you post something where they can't, when the lips completely cover
Yeah.
it, they can't see where it is.
Okay.
I've got a question for you actually on the GoPro front. I've tried, like most people, to get some decent GoPro footage,
Yeah.
particularly actually the inside the barrel shot.
Yeah. It always looks so small.
I had a really
Yeah,
great
it's
surf
really
in New
hard.
Zealand, funnily enough. I was at, I think it was called Greymouth, which is on the west coast of the South Island. Perfect little wedgie beach break. I was out there on my own, getting just perfect little barrels.
Yeah.
Took the GoPro out. I thought I was killing it, basically. I was like, got out, and the first thing you do is like plug the SD card in.
Yeah.
And I look at the footage and it's literally just, you can't even tell that I was in the barrel. It makes,
Yeah, just like.
I started getting really self-conscious and thinking maybe I wasn't getting tubed. So what is the secret with the GoPro shots? You're pretty good at them.
To be honest, what I've done now is,
Google Images.
apart from that one,
Photoshop.
what I've done, I got a pole which is not meant for this, and I've put the GoPro on a pole, and because the pole is behind you,
Yeah.
it does make it look like you're a lot deeper in the barrel than you are. Or sometimes just the GoPro's getting barreled on some photos,
Yeah.
but I've done that specifically just for the photo for my wall, to be honest.
Yeah.
But with the GoPro in your hand on the pole, it is very, very hard to make it out of the barrel because you don't realise how much you use that inside hand
Yeah.
in the face of the wave to like make sure you're in the right place. When that's like that, you pretty much, you can't pump in the barrel. You've just got to hope that you're going to come out, and more often than not you don't.
Yeah.
Whereas when it's in your mouth, it gives you a lot more freedom to, if you have to sort of meander your way through
Okay.
it.
So
Yeah.
It's sacrifice for the art of photography.
It is. So generally with the pole, I'd leave it on the beach and I'll make sure I get like say an hour and a half surfing,
Okay.
and then I'll just go and grab it for 10 minutes at the end of a surf.
Okay, that makes sense, because I have wondered this before, because quite a lot of your
Otherwise
sessions,
you'll-
especially when you're like away, I think there were some really good ones, good photos and videos of you in California.
Yeah.
Like northern or central California, I think it was, and you had some really good ones.
And yeah, that it is literally just leaving it in the car on the beach,
Okay, that
and you
makes
just
more
grab it.
There's
for the
actually,
last few
I was
minutes.
just thinking, there's too many to mention. Even like you had Taiwan, you were scoring waves.
Oh, Taiwan.
That Australia trip you did.
Ireland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, I'm feeling quite
I
envious.
think you kind of undersold your travelling exploits earlier on. But talking, it's funny that you mentioned. Well, we talked about the GoPro and those barrel shots, because largely, as Elliot said at the beginning, modest Mr. Robert Miles, or Mr. Modest Robert Miles, you are someone that you've been on mine and Elliot's radar for a long time, because we went to university with
Yeah.
you. We know you really well, but largely you're kind of the epitome of that underground charge. You're someone that conducts their business without the kind of the pomp or the ceremony, again, aside from those GoPro videos that you post relentlessly. Where does, again, this will lead into another debate, I'm sure, in a moment, but we've talked about today's kind of surf psyche, where people post pictures immediately, and that seems to be the motivation for lots of people.
Yeah, I get what you mean.
I
yeah.
don't think that's yours. I mean, it might be, but where does that motivation to continue surfing, to continue travelling and searching for these waves come from?
I think it's about sort of a lot of people will post stuff online just so they get sort of other people's.
Yeah, it's that hit
It's
of
gratification.
Is it,
Yeah.
is it dopamine? The hit of dopamine you get when you like
They
get a load
feed
of
off
likes?
other people
Yeah.
either being jealous or thinking, "Oh, it's an amazing photo."
Mm-hmm.
But
For you, is it more a real feeling?
I'm not
Excitement?
saying that it doesn't feel good. You know, it's great
Yeah.
if you put a photo on thingy and you go, "Oh my god, looks like you
Yeah.
made a great decision." But actually, the reality was the GoPro's in the barrel, not me.
Yeah.
so it looks amazing, but actually, it's probably not as good as it looked. And
Okay.
like I said, in Wales, if one place is good, generally the whole coast is good.
Yeah.
So,
So your motivation to continue doing these things? Where does it
to be honest, as I get older, I think a lot of it's just for exercise.
We actually
can't get away
Not
with
the
it.
answer we
we
were
actually
looking for.
talked about this when we like surf today, like the kind of when it's like it was today.
Yeah.
And I always say this, it's like, well, people say, what was it like? And I'd be just like, it was exercise.
Yeah.
Because you're literally going out for an hour just to get in and
Yeah,
not
exactly.
get
Yeah.
that really.
And I think as you get older, I think when he was 20, and it was almost like a game who would get the best surf.
Yeah.
But then you only rely on people's word of mouth, and
Yeah.
you know, it could be an average day, but you could catch every good wave. It just could be the luck. It's your luck that day, and you could have a great surf where actually someone else is in exactly the same position and get hardly any good waves, and they've had a terrible surf. So you get.
So talking about that, you and Elliot obviously surfed kind of subpar conditions today.
Yeah.
Are you still, having surfed all these amazing locations and conditions around the world, are you still as enthused to surf 2 foot slop in Wales as you once were?
No.
Can you do it as often? I mean, obviously you've got the time to do it as often, but do you have the motivation to do it as often?
I've been speaking to some people today, and I did say I am Welsh surfed out at the moment. There's only so many cutbacks you can do
Yeah.
in 3, because I have surfed 3 days in a row now. And I didn't really want to go today. I just thought I'd feel bad if I didn't.
Oh, the guilt.
Yeah, and I feel it was like a case of the fear of missing out. It was the FOMO feeling.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, if you don't go, you're going to regret it.
Another thing I always find is that the more you surf, the more you want to surf. When you've had like an injury, for example, and you know you can't be in for 6 weeks or 6 months even, you get used to it and you accept it. But when you've been surfing daily, it kind of then becomes, well, what do I do if I'm not surfing? Almost like, you know, it's like today if I hadn't have surfed, I don't really know what would have been better than surfing. I guess for you now, mountain biking might be a better alternative because that's something that you kind of.
It's definitely helped. Like for instance, tomorrow the northeast is cooking. And I have sacrificed it to go biking tomorrow.
Wow, change man.
Yeah, it is getting that way.
Age.
I guess it's difficult at the moment, isn't it? Because I think we'd all feel, you know, as much as we can now travel more freely. I mean, I still think I'd feel pretty guilty going on a strike mission, you know, somewhere 300, 400 miles away.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not everywhere.
But no, yeah, but we all have to test our eyes, guys. Come on. It's not
Yeah.
And it is nearby.
fun. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
There are some
Very good. Okay.
well-known landmarks.
So, talking, going back to the kind of Instagram, the motivation, the Instagram motivation to surf, we have been having a debate here on Crest, and I think Elliot said it at the beginning, the jockification of surfing, as I termed it.
Okay.
We've been discussing whether surfing should head more in that kind of jock direction, or whether we should stick to our roots. And it's really hard to define jockification. But on the previous podcast, I tried my best to define it, and it was with the help of my sister. Actually, she said it was trying to make surfing into another sport. It was trying to make it into like a football kind of sport, rather than acknowledging the kind of the heritage in surfing that I mean is unique in a sport in that we do have all this heritage surrounding it, and the lifestyle and I know this kind of annoys a lot of people, but the culture, that word. So are you pro jockification of surfing, or are you a purist as well? Are you all about
I mean, unfortunately,
the lifestyle?
I think the culture of surfing is unfortunately probably long gone, especially in the younger generations. But I think as you get older, I think you do start sort of inheriting that way a little bit more.
From my point of view, you're someone that I would consider to be kind of all. I mean, it's more nuanced than saying jock or purist, but I'd say you're on the purist side, in that you're all about the kind of the travel and the fun around it. Like half the fun on surf trips I've been on with you, or more than half, is not the surfing; it's what goes on the beach and
This is
everywhere else.
This is my exact thing. When people speak to me, because you know, in pharmacy, not many people surf, and they're quite happy to. They first thing, why do you surf? But the thing is, most of the surf trips, most of your friends, all the places you've been around the world, none of it would have happened if it wasn't for surfing.
Yeah.
And inevitably, I wouldn't have been in that nightclub completely naked if it wasn't for surfing. And I wouldn't have been in Taiwan or Tahiti or anywhere. Yeah, I would probably have been paying £200 in Ibiza to walk through a door to do it there. Yeah. But no, I mean, surfing for me is more than just surfing terrible 2-foot waves. It's about who you surf with and
Good.
and stuff like that. You know, it's
good answer. You fall on my side of the debate there.
Yeah, but I can see from the younger generation, they've been brought up with Instagram and stuff like that, and it's all about how popular you are and how many likes you get, which none of us can deny. It does feel good if you put something on Instagram, you get 300 likes for it.
Perhaps missing out on something, you know. You see a lot of young kids now going surfing, and even at a young age, they treat every surf like a training session. You know, it's they're working on a particular move every session. Whereas, I think I was just like a rat up a drain pipe. I'd just be frantically catching as many waves as I could, just out of sheer enjoyment when I was a kid. You know, and I'm sure you were probably the same. The idea of going out and trying to achieve a goal every time is something that's maybe sort of taking the fun out of it. Do you think?
Oh, definitely. I mean, to me, it's difficult to sort of. I mean, when you do a competition, treating surfing as a competition to me is quite a difficult. It's quite a difficult thing to do because, like I said, I know it's an old term, but the best surfer is the person having the most fun. If you're not having the most fun, you might have done an air reverse, but you might have not have liked the tweak you had halfway through it. So actually, you're still not feeling good.
Yeah.
And then you've got someone like me who comes in and does a terrible floater, and I'm like, yes.
Yeah, but
or a head dip.
Even when you surf, say 2 foot Ogmore and you're getting a head dip, and you're not taking yourself too seriously. Whereas a lot of guys wouldn't even do something as inane as a head dip because they wouldn't want to look. They wouldn't want to look like they're trying.
They're the surfs that you have the most fun, aren't
exactly.
they? And it's really interesting that you said that you don't think the kind of some of the younger surfers coming up today have experienced it. 'Cause I think we kind of feel the same when we talk about our parents' generation going surfing because they've got such incredible stories that we've heard. Oh man, what would it be like to be back then? And it seemed to be a lot freer. And
there's no evidence of it either. Which is the great
exactly, no Facebook, no Instagram. So these stories were allowed to happen without too much judgment, and they're classic stories. But I wonder if kind of the next generation will listen to some of our stories because we've got some funny stories between us and think, we can't do that anymore. That will never happen. And I wonder if that jockification of surfing is to do with kind of the movement of time, and is it inevitable? I mean, well, that remains to be seen because actually in coming weeks we've got the jockification, jock versus purist debate coming up, and we've got some very interesting guests lined up.
Here's a question for you guys then. So if you could choose an era, the era to be born in, what would you go for?
Elliot and I have had this conversation exactly many times. Elliot's got a brilliant an answer to this. Go for it.
Well, it would 100%. I would want to be in my late teens, around about 66.
Just to confirm for the listener, Elliot wasn't in his late teens around 66. He would like to travel back in time.
He was in his 30s.
I want that.
He's not that old.
I want that hot tub time machine in the corner of the garden, and I would be there. I'd be there with Nat and Bob McTavish surfing, Honolulu Bay. That would be me.
This is another question that I always pose, and I know the answer to this, but again, for the benefit of the listener. Would you take modern equipment back, or would you go with the equipment there at the time?
I would take the knowledge that I have of modern equipment
and make a fortune
and surf the actual equipment of the time considerably better than everyone else.
What you're saying you would do is steal from Simon Anderson.
Pretty much, no. No, I actually, do you know what? It's when I watch videos of like Nat Young, for example, when you watch him surfing in the sort of like 65, 66, he was genuinely surfing as well as any longboarder is surfing now. So I think it's very arrogant of me to say that I could go back and somehow, but I think especially with the shortboard stuff, I think a lot of what limited them was like in the sort of early 70s was knowledge of what was possible. When you see guys like Josh Kerr or something ride a single fin, they can do so much more than those guys could. And it was just because they didn't really know what the kind of what was possible almost. Like Roger Bannister running the 4-minute mile, people thought he was going to die.
Yeah,
they literally thought that. Whereas now it's just a common occurrence, So.
Yeah, of course. Okay, well, that leaves me to say thank you so much, Miles, for coming on. A truly interesting character in Welsh surfing, and someone who will always go in any conditions, especially if it's big and scary.
Unless it's sunny and dry, and I'll be biking.
Unless it's 2 foot onshore. Indeed, and really nice to be able to hear some of those stories in more detail from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Now, to the listener, if you've got something you want to send us, then please do at castcrest@gmail.com. And also, don't forget you can subscribe to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, as well as on YouTube, where you'll be able to listen to any of our ever-growing back catalogue of episodes.
And next week, there's the dog knocking over the beer live from the garden studio. So next week, Tom and I will be reunited as we chat to perhaps one of the most hazard-prone and entertaining raconteurs in Welsh surfing, Mark Splinter Griffiths. And for those of you who know Splint, you're sure to tune in because, well, you'll know what's coming. And for those of you who aren't so familiar with Aberravon's fourth most famous export, after Sheen, Burton and Hopkins, then you are in for a treat. So until then, Hwyl fawr.
Goodbye.
Cheerio.